Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we are welcoming back the author of the best-selling, prize-winning novel called Seating Arrangements. And she has a new novel to talk to us about. It's called Astonish Me. It's written by Maggie Shipstead, who's on board, and published by our favorite publisher, Alfred A. Knopf. Now, the reason we like that publishing house so much is we all love to say Alfred A. Knopf. So, welcome.
Thanks. I also love to say Alfred A. Knopf.
Yeah, we're in a club. One of the interesting things about the two novels is that, in a sense, both of them are about closed worlds. The first book, Seating Arrangements, the world that's closed is a social world, an income kind of place. As it turns out, they're probably not as closed as they think they are. And, of course, in Astonish Me, we enter a world that most of us have never been in, that is the world of the ballet. Did you do that intentionally? You say, oh, wow, another closed world?
No, I really didn't. I think I must obviously be drawn to those worlds as subjects, but this Astonish Me started as a short story, as Seating Arrangements did, that I just couldn't get to work as a short story, and I was writing a different novel and thought I would take a break to revise the short story, and it just sort of spiraled out of control and became 90 pages long and then 150 pages long and turned out to be a book.
And there you were, powerless.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing I could do to stop it.
You couldn't stop it, and you couldn't stop yourself.
It really made for a pleasurable writing experience because it felt sort of illicit, like I was supposed to be working on this other project, and I found that's a good way to get some work done.
As I read the book, I kept saying to myself, this woman must have great experience as a dancer. Lots of classes and all that kind of stuff. Is that true?
No, not at all. My ballet career ended when I was 5.
It ended at the age of 5?
Yeah, due to lack of talent.
Uh-huh.
My mom's a lifelong ballet lover, and so she put me in a class just to see if it would work, and I just obviously had no aptitude for it. But fortunately, she started taking me to the ballet, so I probably saw maybe 4 ballets a year from when I was 5 until I went to college, and since then I've gone to see ballets whenever I have the chance. So really, I'm coming to it as a fan and an admirer more than someone who's actually danced.
Yeah. In some other place, you said that in a way, Astonish Me can be considered a kind of accident, that it was a short story that wouldn't stop growing. Yeah,
I really didn't mean to write it.
It became kind of like the book in the Nutcracker.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dear. Well, your love and admiration for the ballet, I think, almost explodes from the opening pages of the book called Astonish Me. And I'd like you to read that opening section for us, if you could.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this is September 1977 in New York City. Mm-hmm. In the wings, behind a metal rack crowded with bundles of cable and silk flower garlands and the stringless lutes from Act 1, 2 black dachshunds lie in a basket. They are awake but motionless, their small, uneasy eyes fixed on the dancers, who come smiling and leaping off stage and give themselves over to violent exhaustion, standing stooped, hands on hips, heaving like racehorses. The dancers grab fistfuls of tissues from boxes mounted to the light rigs with gaffing tape and swab their faces and chests. Sweat patters on the floor. A stagehand pushes an ammonia-smelling mop around. The pas de deux begins. 2 Russian stars are out alone in the light, both defectors. The surface of the stage has the dull shine of black ice, rosin dusts it like snow. Ordinarily, members of the Corps do not dare acknowledge the dogs, but Joan Joyce crouches and strokes their long backs. She fingers their velvety ears and smooth little skulls. The creatures shrink away in their basket, but she persists. In the shadows, other Corps girls stand waiting in a clump, tutus overlapping like a mat of stiff lavender blossoms. "What are you doing?" one of them whispers. "You can't touch those." Joan's roommate, Elaine Costas, a soloist, is sitting against the wall and stretching. Her point shoes are pressed together at the soles like hands in prayer, her face bent to their arches. Her costume is yellow, the bodice embroidered with gold. "If Ludmilla were going to murder Joan," she says, looking up, "she would have done it already." One of the dogs sets a paw against Joan's wrist and braces away, his hard ebony nails digging into her skin. She kisses at him. He lifts his ears, then remembers himself and flattens them, recanting his interest. Joan has never danced as well as tonight. She is of the Corps, but also entirely herself, both part and whole. The tiny ball of cells clinging to her uterine wall is a secret, but she feels as translucent and luminous as a firefly.
Now you people out there know why I heard that or read it, and I called the publicist and said, I want to do this book on the show. It does everything for me. It brings me quickly, deeply into the world of the ballet, and it also tells me that there's another world at work at the same time. Astonish Me is a lot about ballet, but it's also a great story. Just stay tuned and we'll let you know some of it.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Astonish Me. It's a novel by Maggie Shipstead. It's what we're talking about today on Conversations on the Coast, and it comes from Alfred A. Knopf. One of the people who had some nice things to say about it is a person, I think we would pronounce the name Dani Shapiro. Dani, D-A-N-I?
I think it's Danny.
Dani.
Yes.
Dani Shapiro says, in this exquisitely rendered story of love, loss, betrayal, secrecy, and artistic ambition, Maggie Shipstead takes hold of the reader and doesn't let go. Astonish Me is a haunting and powerful novel. And that's the whole thing here. You do get a hold of us, and you don't put us down. You're terrible. Terrible. All of which leads me illogically to ask you, where does the title Astonish Me come from?
Well, it's actually sort of a historical ballet reference. Sergei Diaghilev, who was the impresario of the Ballet Russe, I think first said it to Jean Cocteau, who was designing costumes and sets for one of his productions. And it sort of became almost this rallying cry for the whole company and sort of a challenge and a dare that he would issue, Tenez-moi. So that's referenced in the book sort of in the course of the story. And when I was maybe halfway through drafting it, it became the title. But I like it because I think it says something about what we're hoping for when we see live performance of any kind. I think you're always hoping to be moved and transported. But it's also about how the people we know best can still astonish us, for better or for worse.
It isn't anything you could say over a roast beef before it's put in the oven, I don't think.
No.
You might think it, but you wouldn't say it.
Yeah, need a little higher drama, I guess.
Yeah. Our friends at Alfred A. Knopf talk about the book this way, that this is the irresistible story of a woman, Joan, a ballerina, with dreams bigger than her talent. And God knows there must be a lot of those ballerinas around, huh? Yeah. And with dreams bigger than her talent can carry her, who retires from the stage after a brief career, marked most notably by an affair with the principal dancer, Arslan Rusakov?
I would say Rusakov.
Rusakov.
Yeah. I'm no authority.
I will accept your pronunciation.
Okay.
Okay. And he's a Russian star whom she helps defect from the Soviet Union. And Joan settles into a quiet life with her husband Jacob and their son Harry, but she cannot escape her past for long. And it's Harry's talent and taste for the world of dance that heightens, and Joan is submerged again into the life that she thought she had shaken. So it becomes a very interesting family story and a generational one, and you can't get away from ballet, I guess. That's what they're saying. I don't know. The most, for me, though, the most intriguing character, I had in my note, unforgettable. I don't know whether that's the right word. Intriguing is a guy known by the name Mr. K.
Yeah.
Who is he, and why does he have a name, Mr. K?
In some ways, that's a reference to how George Balanchine was known as Mr. B. Although the character really doesn't have much in common with him, aside from being this very famous choreographer and someone who inspires almost cult-like devotion in his dancers. And he sort of has the power to elevate dancers to stardom, and he gives to the women he chooses to become his sort of prima ballerinas, he gives them a gift of perfume that he chooses for each of them, and that's sort of a signal that their star is rising.
One of the things that I guess he preaches about dancing is that, I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, that there is something to dance in ballet which goes beyond the story itself, which goes to the body performing the steps and how the way that body is used and how it performs adds something to the story. Am I crazy?
No, that's right, and that's also drawn from Balanchine a bit, in that his sort of purpose as an artist was to move away from the story ballet and make ballet more just about the steps, although he stayed within sort of the classical vocabulary as far as what he wanted his dancers to do. And he had this very particular style. He was into very fast movements, very precise, was really demanding. So yeah, that sort of element of Mr. K is also a Balanchine thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Russian who defects, Arslan Rusakov.
It's a tongue twister, yeah.
Yes. Now, the story of how he gets out of Russia during, which I would think is in the Cold War period, is really quite interesting. Is that styled on any real person or persons?
Yeah, I borrowed to an extent the way that Baryshnikov defected in Toronto. He wasn't allowed to tour with the Kirov for a long time because they thought he was a defection risk, rightfully so. Finally, he was allowed to go with this sort of Bush League troupe of dancers to Canada, and after his performance, he just ran out the stage door, went into a waiting car, and that was it. So part of the reason I used it was because I knew it would work. There just weren't very many ways to defect for dancers in the mid-'70s. And I also wanted the character to be, in some ways, about the idea of Baryshnikov as sort of this star and this charismatic force.
Oh, okay. Well, Astonish Me, in my opinion, is kind of dominated by two women and one man. The man we just spoke about a little bit. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the two women who make the story run. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The very charming Maggie Shipstead is with us today. She is talking about her latest novel, Astonish Me, published by Alfred A. Knopf, and it's all about ballet, but It's also about some very interesting characters. The folks at the New Yorker said some nice things about the book just this week, as a matter of fact. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it just showed up in my mailbox today.
Uh-huh. Well, it showed up in my mailbox yesterday, thank goodness.
You win.
They say it's set in the world of ballet. This gripping novel spans 3 decades, starting in the mid-'70s. That's when the guy escapes from Russia. When Joan, what's Joan's last name?
Her married name is Vince. And,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Terrible names. All right. It spans 3 decades, starting in the mid-'70s, when Joan, a young American dancer, helps a Baryshnikov-like star defect from the Soviet Union. A brief relationship ensues, after which she retreats with another man to a life of suburban motherhood in Southern California, incidentally. The novel's frequent chronological shifts feel strained at times and jarring, but the narrative effectively dramatizes the tensions between family and career, perfectionism and compromise. Shipstead rises to the challenge of evoking the excitement of dance, oh does she, and her descriptions are all the more powerful for emphasizing the hard work behind the grace. One of the things that you repeat, sometimes I felt too often, is what the typical ballet dancer's day is. He or she gets out of bed and does some exercises, then probably brushes his or her teeth. And then they go to a studio or a school, and they start doing some exercises there. They go to the bar and start, and then a teacher comes in and puts them through the various ballet poses. Is that the right phrase, poses?
The technical term for what they do at the bar is battement, like beats. But I am always a little not sure what to call it either. Movements, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And then at some point they may get into working on a particular program or story. But this goes on every day, day in and day out. Mm-hmm. And that's where the striving for perfection comes in, I guess, huh?
Yeah, ballet just to me seems like by far the most brutally demanding of the arts. It just requires so much discipline, and it's like being an Olympic athlete, but having to sort of smile and be graceful as you compete. And that was part of what drew me to it. It's just so alien to me how physical their lives are.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I had dinner in the spring with 2 former New York City ballet dancers, and the thing they said they missed most about dancing was daily class, which I thought was so interesting.
They missed that?
Yeah, they missed the drudgery more than the performance.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking, and this is a terrible thing to say, but it seems to me that being a ballet dancer is harder than being a novelist.
Yeah, I think it is by a long shot.
The 2 powerful women in this story are both ballet dancers. One is named Joan, and the other one is named Elaine. Now, Joan is not as good a dancer as Elaine is, and Joan is the one who retires. And she goes off to live a quiet life in Southern California, but it isn't a quiet life, is it?
Well, it doesn't stay quiet forever. She starts teaching kind of as something she thinks she'll do sort of casually, and the child of their next-door neighbors, a little girl named Chloe, turns out to be quite talented, and she becomes invested in teaching Chloe, and then Joan's own son, Harry, eventually starts dancing and displays a really big talent. And so she finds herself sort of drawn back into ballet and sort of living vicariously to a degree through these children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, her friend Elaine, who was her roommate when she was deep into ballet in New York City, stays in the game, so to speak, through thick and thin. And even she's not, quote, perfect, unquote. She can be what they call a solo dancer, but not a star.
She's a principal dancer.
Principal.
So she rises basically as high as she can within a company, but she still sort of sees herself as kind of a workhorse as opposed to a superstar. I think that's part of what's heartbreaking about ballet is Joan, puts in all the work she can. She's very talented to be in this national company, but I think by genetics, she's just limited in some ways that other dancers aren't, and even Elaine sees this too. And I mean, in my experience, that's part of being an artist of any kind, is you never can quite put out what you've imagined or what you want, and your work's never quite as good as you want it to be, which is sad, and different people contend with it in different ways and sort of encounter their own limitations in different ways.
She really sees her fulfillment as a dancer, I guess, in her son, Harry. Oh, there's a surprise in this novel, and we're not going to tell you about it because you should go out and buy the book, enjoy it, and revel in the surprise. The book is Astonish Me. The author, Maggie Shipstead, been good enough to talk to us today on Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.